started.
Got it. Okay, so I just want to do a check-in on the RBAC initiative. I think we just go around and Amelia and Daniel to see where we are now. Whichever one of you wants to start.
Amelia, please, because I'm trying to grab the issue.
Sure. We're making good progress with the permission categorization. We've consolidated the project and group permissions tables into one table and got rid of the separation between projects and groups for the most part, because we had kind of talked about whether we should preserve that notion and kind of have two separate groups within our categorization scheme, one for projects and one for groups. And we kind of talked about when namespaces are introduced, that difference won't really exist in the same way anymore. And so kind of really collapsing all of those things down into a namespace grouping. So I've gone ahead and done that, and I've pinged all of the design pod members for review, and we've gotten a lot of people's eyes on it. It feels like so far, not everybody's eyes. So I feel like there's some areas where I would still like to get a little bit of feedback. And I've mentioned those people individually on the Figma file. So hopefully we will get some feedback on that. It's what I'm realizing is, so there's not only the two permissions tables, projects and groups, there's also an entirely separate CI/CD permissions table. And in fact, there's a couple different ones, which I just found out about the end of last week. So I've been trying to make sense of that there is a whole separate list of permissions. And so I think that's one of the things I've been working with, like the technical writer and Viveka, to see if there's a way I can include some of those permissions. But I also feel like I'm trying to be careful about expanding the scope too much here, because what we're trying to do is capture the current permissions in the table, but not capture everything. Probably, I'm sure there's going to be things that we are not going to have in this first batch, and I think that that's probably okay. I think if we are conservative with what we're putting in there for our first pass, we can always add additional items to the table, and I'm sure that that will happen in the future. But if we add a bunch of stuff that we actually don't want people to control, which is a little what I'm worried about from like the CI/CD permissions tables, there's a lot of stuff in there that is very granular, and I don't actually know if we want all of that stuff in the permissions table to allow really that much tweaking of the permissions for CI/CD. Maybe we do, but it also seems like that's really diving into the deep end in a way I don't know if we want to do for the MVC for this. So I'm trying to limit the scope as much as possible and not go too crazy.
And that's what I was curious about when we spoke last time, was the can we leverage some of the backend expertise and ask, where are the permissions? What are the variations in permissions? What is lacking from the table, and what exists in its own environment? So I don't know if you saw the table that Alex Pooley had put down in the issue. If you have an opportunity to chat with him or async, I think he'd be a really good leverage or a really good resource to speak with in terms of that backend CI/CD code base for permissions. And is it really necessary to be separate, or is it just kind of something where we decided, oh, we're going to start making custom permissions over here in CI/CD because we didn't have the specificity we needed in the 5 roles in the global environment? So understanding the history of why that exists, and is it possible to break that without breaking anything else, or make it merged into our environment? It might just be the case where it has to live in its own thing, and that could be, now let's look at the CI/CD permissions and do those separate. But talking with the backend team, I think might be really helpful on that. I don't know if it's Alex that would have that, or whoever Vitika works with in her group for backend, but definitely worth a chat. I know only Alex because he's been working with us for so much, and we deal directly with the permissions.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure which group he works with. It sounds like from those exchanges with the developers on that thread that all of the permissions are separate right now. So like all of them will need to be migrated to a different model. And that was kind of my takeaway from that Alex comment, was that like that they're all in separate files and they're all going to need to be migrated to a single, maybe a single table. So it seems like regardless that there's going to be some of that migration that has to occur. How much of it we need to do immediately, I feel like that's the whole like technical piece of this project that I feel like we need. I don't know at what point we start having those conversations, but it feels like that's going to be the hard work here, is like figuring out how to move all those things from all the separate files and all of the references to those files on every single page in the UI. I think that feels like it's probably the big next thing that we're going to need to figure out for sure.
Should we invite somebody from backend on our next sync or this sync to talk about these things? Because I remember reading exactly the same thing you just mentioned. And it felt to me like, oh, that sounds like an opportunity for us to fix this problem now, rather than having to think about it compartmentally and having to rethink every time we have to go back to another permissions table and say, okay, now we're gonna do the pipeline permissions. I think if we back up and say, let's reinvest that time and focus today on making sure we clean up the permissions across the entire organization, then we can proceed further down without having to, backtrack or make revisions. But again, this is all based on how complicated that would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But I feel like
getting backend involved at this point sounds correct. Like the aspects and points and granularity that you have in the table right now is subject to what is feasible too. So like those could just be line items that they could be a wireframe that we show to engineering, and their feedback on how this will be constructed into like basically a library with a parser and a table is going to will be our reality, right?
Yeah.
So letting backend come in and help bring the guardrails in on this project is probably the best next step, even showing like Daniel's wires and walking through like the general concepts and interactions that we're expecting or we would want. And then the data that we're expecting users to interact with, which will then lead into, I'm sure, down the road, a more process-oriented approach towards adding permissions from like all the other product teams. Again, I'm sure you don't want to be the one that has to go in and change the permissions every time that another team makes an update. So we found it's kind of the Wild West it was today, which was a huge shock to me. But I'm sure that putting in a process too,
Yes,
would be paramount to the sustainability of this. Yeah. So I would say, we got 9 days left in the milestone. That's probably as long as I would give everyone to kind of continue giving feedback on the categorization model. If it were to ship as it was today, it would be a million times better than what we have, which is nothing. And I think some people may just trying to fit in things that may not relate, or they hear permissions and think of something different. Think of, oh, we have those, here's this. It's not tracked in our docs, but it's a thing. Every feature and every click is permissioned in GitLab. So
yeah, that's a lot of what's been happening.
And also, like, I think we're at a point where we've given enough feedback or given enough time for people to provide feedback. If they haven't provided any feedback by now, then they're basically either not paying attention, which is a problem, which is not our problem, but just FYI, thankfully Blair's here to be made aware of that. But secondarily, it's like, okay, then you are fine with it and we'll just move forward. That's the end of it.
And you can always iterate later and say, oh, this is supposed to be here. Okay, easy change. It's really just changing where the location is in the table, creating the table, getting the table to be stored on a local instance, and all that other stuff is the huge task. So
yeah,
I think getting eyes on that.
And I think also, like, when we get into chat with the backend team, we'll have like a lot of that really fleshed out and finalized in terms of like, they'll say, oh yeah, this is exactly what we've been planning, like reading Andy, Alex's comment. And he's like, this is what the dream we've been planning for a while. So it looks like we're got the support from the backend team already, at least from Alex's perspective. And I think there will be a real interest in pushing that forward, because I think as Hannah had wrote here, like we can't be making changes permissions every time somebody has a new feature or something. If there's a simple modal way of doing it by saying new feature, implement into the system, spits out permissions, and then auto populates into the table, boom, done. That would be the dream.
Yeah, there'll probably end up being another checklist item in the MR that has you referencing wherever the table's stored. If there's a change, yeah.
Well, I'll keep continuing to clean things up based on everyone's feedback. How is it most helpful for me to kind of wrap this issue up for your team, Daniel and Hannah? I can post the screenshot in the issue description, but I did some visual explorations and I put those into your Figma file. Are there other things that you feel like you would need from me just to make sure that I have all of the pieces done that you were hoping to have done on this issue? Just to kind of check in on that.
Yeah, for me, no, I think you are done with your portion, and I appreciate the little wireframes you've done already, and I'm going to integrate those in the next step. So that's what I'm going to do next, is go back through the flows and put in these new tables, kind of like a higher fidelity mock-up and prototype, so we can actually maybe pass that around up the chain, like to product presentations and whatnot, saying this is what we're thinking about, and have it be interactive, and then also get some validation with that with end users. So I'm actually running some tests right now with some interviews with some sysadmins, and I'll try and include that into feedback sessions. What do you think about this process? But already, like in our interviews in the past, people are asking for something like what you've visualized already. So I think we're nearly there.
Daniel, I think another thing we could do too, or I'm still a little fuzzy on who's technically like where this falls, but we do have that list of the dozen or so people we interviewed for our research to begin with, who have said, oh, once you have a mock-up or something, I'd be glad to look at it. So we can go back to them as well.
And I think I can have that done either this week or the beginning of next. So within this milestone.
That's
want to, oh, sorry, Amelia. Do we want to create, or are you managing that in a research issue, or should we create one? And
so yes and no. It's a sysadmin's issue. Let me find it real quick.
So you would like tack on the validation as part of, and then like additional research.
So it was one of the questions I was asking in my interviews. How do they feel about granular permissions, or how do they do, access control? And a lot of it's done through like Active Directory. So it's already kind of like this one. Let me put in the agenda for us. So it wasn't specifically tied to asking about RBAC stuff, but there was some questions here and there about how do you manage roles and permissions? Would you like more granular permissions?
Okay.
So that's just the dovetail link to all the videos. I'm in round 2 right now, so I had my first one today.
Are you validating the solution with them?
So I ask, how do they set up their permissions?
Okay, more of
How do they feel permissions limit or allow what they want? Do they have any restrictions that they are lacking? I kind of ask the questions of kind of like not posing a solution, but I do say that, after that, I ask, would you like something more granular? We're trying to work on something to improve the permissions to add that flexibility, but I don't say it's going to be this, specifically. I say like, perhaps a way you can toggle things on and off. But yeah, definitely, I bring it up, but without any sort of specificity.
We want to go through a solution validation process. We could try to get those customers that Hannah talked to and just generate more confidence in the solution. Not that I don't think any of us are lacking confidence, but I think there's probably some like good nuggets to pull out. Like, oh, it'd be nice if I had this type of information at this part of the flow so that I could make my decision easier, or et cetera, et cetera. So I guess,
I was thinking of that exactly in the process of making the wireframes, is that what more could be added or what more could be taken out to help, make it easier or make it more understandable. So like having helper text or, info bubbles or any of that sort of stuff necessary. And I think that might be where the validation might come into. I don't think what we've come up with will have much pushback from anybody. I think it'll be pretty well received. It's more of like that supplementary stuff. Like, I wish I had like a helper text here, like a hover or something like that.
Yeah, some more stuff to fill out whatever could be missing or help with the roadmap of this particular feature. So then we'll be ending 14.8 next week. Perhaps in 14.9 or from now until the end of 14.9, we can get developer eyes on the prototype and their feedback, as well as like some solution validation. By the end of 14.9, be able to wrap this up, the MVC it is, and say, here's a validated solution from an engineering perspective and a user perspective. And here's our MVC. Does that sound like a timeline that's achievable?
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, I think that sounds great, because I think that would time well with the earliest we could possibly start working on it anyway. So.
Okay. Was that around 14.9.10 or Q?
Yep. Probably around 10. I'd already done most of my planning for 9, and we still don't have much capacity. So.
Yeah.
Okay. 10 or 15?
Good question.
You never know. I've seen a .13 here before, so. Okay, and then I know we had mentioned too, as part of this project, to have a broader point of view, a more extended vision of this.
Mm-hmm.
That would probably be something that we wouldn't need to deliver in 14.9. Is that something that you would like us to still have? Like something that could be more of a North Star?
Mm-hmm. I really
I'm
would.
assuming that's like the wireframe that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Or the prototype, I mean.
Probably filled out to more of a like granular extended level of, we know we can't do this in one milestone, that's okay, but it can be definitely something we work on for 3 to 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that can be used in the strategic direction page or, any materials. RBAC has come up again on another project I'm working on for software supply chain security.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's another one of those, like, do you have RBAC? So it's amazing the extensibility of this feature to everything.
I think once like I get the new prototype updated and y'all take a look at it and offer feedback and make some updates, we can totally pitch it, or Hannah could totally pitch it, whatever the monthly or weekly product thing that you do at the higher up level.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can, pass it around with the teams, because the prototype will be public, and pass it around for people to then pass out to their customers and say, take a look, give feedback. It's an open prototype. Just click on the comment button and add comments, and we can follow up with that.
Will the prototype be based around like a set of tasks? Like, so that it'd be easy to bring into user testing, because it's hard to build in Figma, especially. It's hard to build these things to be as dynamic as allowing anyone to go and mess around with it versus having like a guided path of you want to do this or you want to do this.
Yeah, I think that's probably the step I'd probably want y'all's feedback on is what should the fidelity of this next prototype be? Should it be just a walkthrough where we say, like what the first one was, I did the video walkthrough, like now it's with higher fidelity with more, actual content, or do you want to make it like really robust, interactive? My initial assumption would be like just a walkthrough with kind of like the job to be done. Like I want to create granular permissions for my team and assign them to a person or something like that, and then walk through that process again and use that as a presentation rather than perhaps an interactive prototype and then link them to the issue for feedback, because then that would prevent people from clicking around. Like, why is this not working? That's always a problem I see with people seeing high level fidelity of prototypes. They're like, it doesn't work.
They click and they see the blue boxes where they can click.
Yeah.
I think for the sake of usability testing, we want to take them give them a few set of tasks to achieve that are rounded enough to feel like we have confidence in and a smaller solution. And then maybe for the socializing aspect of it, it can be a walkthrough video that could leverage the same prototype, so you're not building two. And you're just building one that's pretty much predicated on validating. But that also does enough to show engineers like an activity, right? So it could be, a compliance or a DevOps focused, whichever one we think is a bigger bucket, or a couple, and it could be about adding and removing and supplementing, etc.
So maybe like do the first level of the prototype with high fidelity and the walkthrough ability, and then this next iteration will have the different jobs to be done or different tasks to go through. So adding basically flexibility or adding complexity to the prototype. I think at that phase, I'd probably ask for y'all to help, and can we, collaboratively work on the prototype? You do this flow and I'll do the other flow or whatever.
Yeah. And now Figma's had some updates to their prototyping capabilities, so we don't have to build it out like it's a 1940s Disney movie with every frame, maybe 500 frames to get a click through. So yeah, I'll take a look at that. We're happy to help. Sorry for speaking for you, Amelia, but I'm happy to help.
I'm also happy to help.
Okay, great. So we're getting close to time. Hannah, is there anything we haven't discussed or any concerns that you have?
No, I feel pretty good about things. I think this has gone way faster than I've ever seen it go at any other company, and really productive. So I'm really thankful for all the work you've all put into this.
It's awesome to hear.
I had one question about the categorizations that we've come up with. Andy and I talked a little bit about how to validate those groupings. A lot of it is just based on what's in the permissions table currently. It's just kind of consolidating those groups a little bit more so we don't have 20 of them. But so I wouldn't say like the level of confidence in what we've come up with is low or anything like that, but how we might want to validate that. There have been some various ideas circulated, like tree jack test of the entire thing, whether that's necessary or whether we could identify a few things that maybe we're not totally sure about the positioning of, and ask users to find those items when we're doing solution validation. So kind of validating the information architecture as we're validating the solution as a possibility. But I didn't know if y'all had thoughts on that, or if you feel like we should do a full like tree jack test to see how everything stands separately from the solution validation. I just thought I would ask that of the group in case you had feelings.
I think your work done already is pretty well validated, but it's, I guess if you want that external validation, I don't see any problem. Why not? The only question is if you have time to pursue it. I mean, I don't know where you want to fit that in your other work, or if Andy has an opportunity to help with that. But I mean, I feel it's pretty well done already. So I mean, it's up to you. I think how you feel confident, how confident you feel with that.
Yeah, I'm not getting a lot of signals yet that there's a low confidence in the IA you've proposed, right? So I think I would love any excuse in the world to do a tree test because those are the coolest things to me. But I think we could use keep that in our back pocket if there's if we see a lot of navigation problems in the usability test, right? In this validation. And the validation should be broad enough to have users going through a few categories, not just like one and a checkbox and done. So we'll be able to get that confidence or sense of confidence during the solution validation, because solution validation isn't just the end of the process. It can, like, research can beget research. So that could be our, the IA is wrong, what do we do? Tree test. And then we use the results of that to then, reorganize the table if need be. Yeah. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of pushback in the categorization issue right now, enough so that we need to kind of prove the confidence versus the alternative.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to, Andy and I had chatted a little bit about that. So I just wanted to raise that with the larger group to see if there were strong thoughts or feelings one way or the other.
I'm also going to do a UX showcase on all the RBAC stuff we've been doing. So I'll keep it focused on the wireframe aspect of it, just so I don't steal your thunder if you wanted to do presentation on your portions that you've done so far. But yeah,
feel free to present, and I mean, I'll be at the showcase. You're doing the European one?
I don't remember. Blair, you said it was the 30th or the something?
March 30th, which would be America's.
Okay. Yeah, I'm there. So yeah, if you need a celebrity shout out,
I mean, are there any, is there precedent for a pairing or tripling up of UX showcases? I'm with special guests. I don't know. How can we do this?
I mean, we did in the past where we only had like one showcase, and then everyone's like, anybody want to volunteer? And so, I mean, that was one thing, but yeah, so I don't know if like this would be an opportunity for us to sync on that. I didn't know about the EMEA UX showcase. It's not on my calendar. I live here, but I shift my schedule to US.
I know that there was one every other couple of weeks, or there's one special one. There's precedent. There have been people to team up on them. We got some time, so we can kind of figure that out. Yeah. Sweet. Awesome. Well, we're at time. I'll monitor the progress and see when the next best time to set up one of these syncs is. Looks like we'll have some heads down work ahead of us. I'm around if anybody needs anything. And great job, everyone. It's amazing progress.
Ciao, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
See y'all later.